Okay, Reddit, buckle up because this is a story about my family and it's a doozy. It's a story of favoritism so blatant, it could make Cinderella jealous. It's about a golden child, a scapegoat, that's me, and a slow-motion train wreck that's been years in the making. My brother, Silas, was the golden child. From the moment he was born, he could do no wrong. He was handsome, charming, on the surface anyway, and effortlessly talented at everything he tried. Sports. Silas was the star quarterback. Academics. Honor roll every year. Music. Could pick up any instrument and play it like a virtuoso. Me. Well, I was just Liam. The quiet one. The smart one. But not in a way that impressed anyone. I was good at math and science, the nerdy stuff. Silas was good at being Silas. Our parents worshipped him. Every accomplishment was met with parades and accolades. Every mistake was brushed under the rug. If Silas broke a window, it was an accident. If I accidentally spilled juice, I was clumsy and careless. You get the picture. It wasn't just our parents either. Even our extended family fawned over Silas. Holiday gatherings were basically a Silas appreciation festival. I'd sit in the corner, trying to be invisible, while everyone else sang his praises. It wasn't that I didn't love my brother. I did, in a weird, complicated way. But it was impossible not to resent the constant, overwhelming favoritism. It shaped my childhood, my adolescence, and honestly, it still affects me today. High school was interesting. Silas was the king of the school, naturally. I was the kid who got good grades and participated in the science club. We lived in different worlds. He had a revolving door of girlfriends, while I was lucky if I got a hello from anyone outside my small circle of friends. I tried to carve out my own space to find my own worth outside of Silas's shadow. But it was hard. Everything always came back to him. Even my parents' pride in my academic achievements felt hollow. It was always, "That's great, Liam. But did you hear Silas got a scholarship to state?" State. Of course, Silas got a full ride to State University on a football scholarship. It was a huge deal. Our parents were ecstatic. They threw a massive party, inviting everyone they knew. I remember standing in the background, watching Silas bask in the spotlight, and feeling this familiar ache in my chest. It wasn't jealousy. Not exactly. It was more like a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I was tired of the comparison, tired of the constant reminder that I would never measure up. I was tired of being the other son. I went to a smaller, less prestigious university. It was my choice. I wanted to get away, to be my own person, away from the constant noise of Silas's life. College was good for me. I thrived academically, made some great friends, and even had a couple of short-lived relationships. For the first time, I felt like I was living my own life, not just existing in the orbit of my brother. But even then, Silas's presence loomed large. Our parents would call, and the conversation would inevitably turn to him. How was football going? Was he still dating that cheerleader? Was he enjoying his classes? My life updates were always an afterthought. "Oh, that's nice, Liam. Anyway, Silas, It was infuriating. It was also, sadly, predictable. Silas predictably did well at State, at least for a while. He was a decent player, though not quite the superstar everyone had expected him to be. But he was charming, and that carried him far. He partied, he dated, and he generally lived the college experience to the fullest. I, on the other hand, buried myself in my studies. I double-majored in computer science and mathematics, and I loved it. I loved the challenge, the logic, the problem-solving. It was my escape, my world. I graduated with honors, got a great job offer at a tech company, and started my career. I was doing well, by all objective measures. But in my parents' eyes, I was still just Liam. Silas, however, started to falter. His grades slipped, his football performance declined, and he got into some trouble with the university. Nothing major, but enough to tarnish his golden image. Our parents, of course, made excuses for him. It was the coach's fault, or the professors were unfair, or he was just going through a phase. But the truth was, Silas wasn't used to failing. He'd always been able to coast on his charm and natural talent. But college was a different beast. It required hard work, dedication, and resilience, and Silas didn't have any of those things. Then came the real blow. Silas got injured during a game, a serious knee injury that ended his football career. Just like that, his golden path was shattered. The scholarship was gone. The future he and our parents had envisioned vanished. It was a turning point, not just for Silas, but for our whole family. The dynamic shifted, subtly at first, but it was definitely there. Silas was no longer the shining star, and our parents' attention, for the first time, started to drift towards me, not because they suddenly valued my accomplishments, but because Silas was no longer fulfilling their expectations. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. I watched Silas struggle, and I felt a strange mix of emotions. Pity, certainly. It wasn't easy to see my brother, the once invincible Silas, reduced to a shadow of his former self. But there was also a sense of vindication, maybe. Not in a malicious way, but in a way that said, "See? I told you so. Life isn't always fair. Talent isn't everything." I tried to be supportive, to offer him a hand, but Silas wasn't interested. He was bitter, angry, and resentful. He lashed out at everyone, especially our parents, who he blamed for putting so much pressure on him. And that, Reddit, is where the real drama begins. Because Silas's fall from grace didn't just affect him. It set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to betrayal, humiliation, and the very real possibility of financial ruin for our family. And I, the quiet, nerdy kid who always lived in the shadow of the golden child, would find myself right in the middle of it. Silas's injury wasn't just a personal tragedy. It had ripple effects throughout our family. Our parents, who had always pinned their hopes and dreams on his success, were devastated. They'd invested a lot of time, money, and emotional energy into Silas's football career, and now it was all gone. They started to panic about their own future, their retirement, and how they were going to manage without Silas's potential NFL riches. And that's when Silas, in his infinite wisdom, came up with a plan. A brilliant plan, as he called it. A plan that would, according to him, make us all rich. Silas had always had a knack for sales. He could charm the socks off anyone, convince them to buy anything. He decided he was going to start a business. An online business, of course, because that was where the real money was, according to him. He had this vague idea about selling some kind of health supplement, I think. Some kind of miracle cure-all that would make people lose weight, gain muscle, and basically become superhuman. The details were fuzzy, but the promises were grand. And our parents, desperate for a new hope, a new Silas-shaped dream to cling to, ate it up. They mortgaged their house. They took out loans. They invested every penny they had into Silas's venture. I tried to warn them. I told them it sounded like a scam, that Silas had no business experience, that the whole thing was too good to be true. But they wouldn't listen. They accused me of being negative, of not supporting my brother, of being jealous. So Silas started his business. He hired a few of his old football buddies to help him, none of whom had any more business acumen than he did. They spent money like water. Fancy offices, expensive equipment, lavish parties. It was all about appearances, about projecting an image of success, even though they weren't making any money. I watched it all unfold with a growing sense of dread. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, and I knew I was going to be in it. My parents, blinded by their faith in Silas, were oblivious to the reality of the situation. They kept pouring money into the business, convinced that it was just a matter of time before it took off. I, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly worried. I had my own life to think about. I was doing well at my job, saving money, planning for my future. I didn't want to be dragged down by my brother's reckless venture, but my parents, in their desperation, started to pressure me. They asked me to invest. They said it was a family opportunity, that we all needed to support each other. I refused. I told them I wasn't going to throw my hard-earned money away on a pipe dream. This caused a huge rift. They accused me of being selfish, of turning my back on my family when they needed me most. Silas, of course, joined in. He called me a loser, a nerd, a coward. He said I didn't have the guts to take risks, that I was going to end up a miserable failure. The tension in our family became unbearable. Holiday gatherings were no longer about Silas's achievements. They were about the business. Every conversation revolved around it. How much money they were going to make, how successful they were going to be, how I was missing out on the opportunity of a lifetime. I felt like an outsider, even more so than before. I tried to distance myself, to focus on my own life, but it was impossible to escape the drama. And then the inevitable happened. The business collapsed. It turned out, surprise, surprise, that Silas's miracle supplement was nothing more than snake oil. The fancy offices, the expensive parties, the whole facade crumbled. The money was gone, all of it. Our parents were devastated. They lost everything, their house, their savings, their retirement. They were left with a mountain of debt and a shattered dream. And Silas? He did what he always did. He blamed someone else. He blamed his employees. He blamed the economy. He blamed the government. He refused to take any responsibility for his own failures. He even tried to blame me, saying that if I had invested, things might have been different. The audacity was astounding. The fallout was catastrophic. Our family was torn apart. The financial ruin was bad enough, but the emotional damage was even worse. Our parents, once so loving and supportive, were now bitter and resentful. They blamed Silas, but they also blamed themselves for being so gullible, for believing in him. And they blamed me for not helping, for not preventing the disaster. Silas, of course, remained unapologetic. He moved away, started a new life, and left our parents to pick up the pieces. He never took responsibility, never expressed remorse, never offered to help. He was still the golden child, even in his failure. And I was still just Liam, the one who tried to warn them, the one who was left to deal with the aftermath. The aftermath of Silas's failed business venture was brutal. Our parents, once vibrant and hopeful, were now shells of their former selves. They were drowning in debt, their house was in foreclosure, and their health was deteriorating rapidly. The stress and disappointment had taken a heavy toll. I, on the other hand, was doing relatively well. My career was thriving. I had bought my own apartment, and I was financially stable. But I couldn't ignore the situation with my parents. I felt a sense of responsibility, a need to help, even though they had treated me so poorly for so many years. I knew I couldn't just stand by and watch them lose everything. So, I stepped in. I started paying their bills. I helped them navigate the complex legal processes of foreclosure and bankruptcy, and I provided them with emotional support. It wasn't easy. They were often resentful, bitter, and even hostile. They still blamed me in a way for not preventing the disaster, for not investing in Silas's business. But I tried to be patient, to understand their pain, and to focus on helping them get back on their feet. It was a strange role reversal. For years, I had been the one needing their support, their approval, their love. Now, I was the one providing it. And Silas? He was nowhere to be seen. He had washed his hands of the whole situation, leaving me to deal with the mess he had created. The weight of responsibility was immense. I was working long hours at my job, trying to keep my own life on track, while also dealing with my parents' financial and emotional crisis. It was exhausting, both physically and mentally. I felt like I was carrying the entire family on my shoulders, and no one else seemed to care. I resented Silas for his selfishness, for his lack of accountability, for his ability to just walk away and leave me to clean up his mess. But I also felt a strange sense of duty, I guess. A sense that I had to do the right thing, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness and well-being. During this time, I also started to uncover the extent of Silas's betrayal. It wasn't just his failed business that had caused the financial ruin. It was something much worse. It turned out that Silas had been siphoning money from the business for his own personal use. He had been living a lavish lifestyle, buying expensive cars, taking extravagant vacations, all while the business was hemorrhaging money. He had been using our parents' investment as his own personal piggy bank, and he didn't care about the consequences. The revelation was sickening. It added another layer of anger and resentment to my already complex feelings towards Silas. He wasn't just a failure, he was a thief. He had stolen from our parents, betrayed their trust, and left them to suffer the consequences. I confronted Silas about it, of course. I managed to track him down and tell him exactly what I thought of him. He, as always, denied everything. He accused me of lying, of trying to turn our parents against him, of being jealous of his success. Even though he was a complete failure at this point, he was utterly shameless, completely devoid of any remorse or guilt. The conversation ended with us both saying things we probably shouldn't have, and I haven't spoken to him since. The whole experience left me feeling drained and disillusioned. I had always known that Silas was selfish and irresponsible, but I hadn't realized the depths of his depravity. It shattered any remaining illusions I had about him, and it solidified my decision to cut him out of my life. The financial recovery was slow and painful. It took years to rebuild our parents' lives, to get them back on their feet. I worked tirelessly, both at my job and in helping them, and eventually, things started to improve. They managed to save their house, to pay off their debts, and to find a new sense of stability. But the emotional scars remained. The trust between them and Silas was shattered beyond repair, and the family dynamic was forever changed. And me? I was left with a deep sense of weariness, but also a strange sense of pride. I had stepped up when no one else would. I had taken responsibility, and I had helped my parents through the darkest period of their lives. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fair, but I had done it. And in the end, That was all that mattered. Years passed. Our parents eventually managed to rebuild their lives, though they never fully recovered from the financial devastation caused by Silas. They lived modestly, relying on their savings and a small pension. I continued to support them, both financially and emotionally, and we developed a closer bond than we had ever had before. It was a strange and bittersweet development. The tragedy had brought us together, but it had also left a permanent scar on our family. Silas remained estranged. He would occasionally call, usually when he needed money, but our parents had finally learned their lesson. They refused to give him anything, and they made it clear that they wanted nothing to do with him. I, on the other hand, had built a successful and fulfilling life for myself. My career was thriving, I had invested wisely, and I was financially secure. I had also met someone special, a wonderful woman named Sarah. She was kind, intelligent, and supportive, and she loved me for who I was, not for who my parents wanted me to be. We got married, bought a house, and started planning our future together. For the first time in my life, I felt truly happy and content. But the shadow of Silas still lingered. The past had a way of creeping back into my life, reminding me of the pain and betrayal I had experienced. Then came the unexpected twist. Our parents passed away. It happened suddenly, a double tragedy that shocked and saddened me. They had both been in relatively good health, but a sudden illness took them both within a few weeks of each other. It was a devastating blow, even though I had expected it eventually. I had made peace with their mortality, but that didn't make the loss any less painful. The funeral was a somber affair. Friends, family, and acquaintances came to pay their respects. It was a reminder of the life my parents had lived, the people they had touched, and the legacy they had left behind. And then, there was Silas. He showed up at the funeral, looking as charming and self-assured as ever. It was like he hadn't aged a day, while the rest of us were carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. He offered his condolences, but his words felt hollow and insincere. He hadn't been there for our parents in their final years, and now he was trying to act like he cared. I barely acknowledged him. I had nothing to say to him. The funeral was difficult enough without having to deal with his presence. After the funeral, the will was read. It was a simple document outlining how our parents' assets were to be divided. And that's when the second shock came. Our parents had left everything to me, every single thing. Their house, their savings, their possessions. Silas got nothing. I was stunned. I hadn't expected it. I knew our parents were disappointed in Silas, but I hadn't realized the extent of their disillusionment. It was a clear and powerful message from beyond the grave, a final definitive statement about their feelings towards their two sons. Silas, of course, was furious. He threw a tantrum, accusing our parents of being unfair, of playing favorites, of punishing him for his mistakes. He demanded that I share the inheritance with him, claiming that he deserved it just as much as I did. I refused. I told him that our parents had made their wishes clear, and I wasn't going to go against them. He threatened to sue me, to contest the will, but I knew he didn't have a case. Our parents' intentions were obvious. The inheritance was a mixed blessing. On the one hand, it provided me and Sarah with financial security, a chance to build an even better future for ourselves. On the other hand, it brought up a lot of complicated emotions, guilt, sadness, and a renewed sense of resentment towards Silas. It was like our parents were still trying to control us even from beyond the grave. But in the end, I decided to accept their decision. I knew they had their reasons, and I wasn't going to second-guess them. I used the inheritance wisely, honoring their memory and building a good life for myself and Sarah. And Silas? He faded, back into the shadows, bitter and resentful, a constant reminder of the pain and drama that had plagued our family for so long. Life moved on. Sarah and I built a beautiful life together. We traveled, pursued our careers, and enjoyed each other's company. The pain of the past started to fade, though it never truly disappeared. The scars were still there, but they weren't as raw or as painful as they once were. I had finally found a sense of peace and happiness, a sense of belonging that had eluded me for so long. And then Silas reappeared. It had been years since I had last seen or spoken to him. He had drifted in and out of my life, usually only contacting me when he needed something. But this time, it was different. He called me out of the blue, his voice surprisingly subdued. He said he wanted to meet, to talk. I was hesitant. I didn't know what he wanted, and I wasn't sure I wanted to reopen old wounds. But something in his voice, a hint of desperation, made me agree. We met at a small cafe, a neutral location. Silas looked different. He was older, of course, but he also seemed worn down, defeated. The charm was still there, but it was faded, like a once bright painting that had lost its luster. He started by apologizing, a genuine apology, it seemed, for the pain he had caused, for the way he had treated me, for the betrayal and the selfishness. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had taken our parents for granted, and that he had ruined everything. I was surprised. I hadn't expected this. Silas had never been one to take responsibility for his actions, but here he was, admitting his mistakes. I listened cautiously, trying to gauge his sincerity. He went on to explain his situation. His life hadn't exactly been a success story. He had struggled to hold down a job, his relationships had failed, and he was facing financial difficulties. He was, in a way, reaping what he had sown. And then came the real reason for his visit. He asked me for help. Not for money this time, but for something else. Something far more unexpected. He told me he had a child, a young daughter about 5 years old whom he adored. But he was facing a serious health issue, one that could potentially be life-threatening. He needed to ensure that his daughter would be taken care of if something happened to him. And that's where I came in. He asked me if Sarah and I would be willing to become his daughter's guardians, to take her in, raise her, and provide her with a loving home if he was no longer able to. I was speechless. This was the last thing I had expected. To become the guardian of Silas's child? The irony was almost cruel. The man who had caused so much pain and suffering in my life was now asking me to step in and care for his daughter. I didn't know how to respond. I needed time to process this, to think about it, to talk to Sarah. I told Silas that I would consider his request, but I couldn't give him an answer right away. He understood. He thanked me for listening and left, leaving me with a whirlwind of emotions and a life-altering decision to make. I went home and told Sarah everything. She was just as stunned as I was. We talked for hours, weighing the pros and cons, trying to make sense of this bizarre situation. On the one hand, it was Silas, the man who had caused so much pain, the man I had cut out of my life. The thought of being connected to him again, even indirectly, was unsettling. On the other hand, it was a child, an innocent little girl who needed someone to care for her. And if Silas was truly facing a serious health issue, she might have no one else. It was a moral dilemma, a conflict between my personal feelings and my sense of responsibility. We decided to meet Silas's daughter. Her name was Lily, and she was adorable. She was bright, curious, and full of life. She had Silas's charm, but she also had a sweetness and vulnerability that was heartbreaking. Meeting her made the decision even more difficult. How could we say no to this innocent child? How could we turn our backs on her, even if it meant dealing with Silas? We talked some more, and eventually we made a decision. We would do it. We would become Lily's guardians, if it came to that. It wouldn't be easy, and it would undoubtedly bring up a lot of complicated emotions. But we couldn't let an innocent child suffer because of her father's past mistakes. Silas's health deteriorated rapidly. The diagnosis was worse than we had initially feared, and he didn't have much time left. He spent his final weeks making arrangements for Lily, ensuring that everything was in order for her to come and live with us. It was a strange and emotional experience. To see Silas, the once arrogant and self-centered brother, now humbled and vulnerable, focused solely on the well-being of his child. It was a side of him I had never seen before. We spent time with Lily, getting to know her, preparing her for the transition. She was a remarkable child, resilient and adaptable, but also understandably scared and confused. She loved her father dearly, and the thought of losing him was devastating. Silas passed away, and Lily came to live with us. It was a significant adjustment, both for her and for Sarah and me. We were suddenly parents, responsible for the care and upbringing of a young child. It was a role we had never planned for, but we embraced it with love and determination. Lily brought a new kind of joy and purpose into our lives. She was a bright light in what had often been a dark and complicated family history. She reminded me of the importance of forgiveness, of compassion, and of choosing love over resentment. But Lily also brought up the past. She had Silas's eyes, his smile, his mannerisms. She reminded me of him constantly, and it was often painful. I had to confront my feelings towards my brother, to find a way to reconcile the pain he had caused with the love I felt for his daughter. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it, for Lily's sake. Sarah was a rock. She supported me through it all, helping me to heal, to forgive, and to embrace this new chapter in our lives. She loved Lily as her own, and Lily adored her in return. We became a family, a different kind of family, but a family nonetheless. And that, Reddit, is where the story takes its final, unexpected turn. Years later, Lily is a teenager. She's smart, kind, and talented, and she's brought so much joy into our lives. But she's also curious about her father. She wants to know about him, about his life, about the family history. And that's where things get complicated. I have to decide what to tell her. How much to reveal about Silas's past, about the pain and betrayal he caused, about the financial ruin and the family drama. Do I sugarcoat it, protect her from the truth? Or do I tell her everything, warts and all, so she can understand her own history? It's a dilemma that weighs heavily on me. I want to be honest with her, but I also don't want to tarnish her memory of her father. I want her to know the truth, but I also don't want to burden her with the pain of the past. And that, Reddit, is where my story ends. Not with a neat resolution, but with a lingering question. A question about family, forgiveness, and the enduring power of the past. It's a story about a golden child, a scapegoat, and the unexpected ways that life can bring us together, even after years of pain and estrangement. It's a story about the complexities of family relationships, the enduring power of love, and the difficult choices we have to make when faced with the consequences of the past. It's my story, and it's still unfolding. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.